Thanks, Paul. When the good people of Library and Archives Canada contacted me a few months ago and kindly invited me to participate in this symposium, they asked me to do something on the Irish language. And the reality is, as it relates to the story of the Irish language in the past, it still remains largely undocumented, though I recognise that someone like Ken Nielsen at St FX and Antigonish is working on the history of the Irish language in North America, and Peter Toner down there is doing wonderful work on Irish language speakers in New Brunswick, and I hope to see that material published over the next while. But really, what I've decided to do is to focus on the present day and to look at the situation of the Irish language through my own experiences. And I must say, I have a general rule that I detest personal narratives. I sort of feel if somebody starts on a personal narrative, they ought to go to confession, they ought to go to talk to their therapist, or they ought to write a novel about it. But I'm hoping well, that's my general rule. I'm hoping that this will be the exception to the rule. I also want this paper, however, to be a gentle reminder, and it builds on from what Jerry was saying there, that a gentle reminder that the Irish experience in Ireland and abroad, including Canada, has found expression not solely in the English language. Okay. It's so difficult as a language. The standard of teaching is dire, and the teachers are even worse. Sure, it's no connection with the real world out there. We aren't able to use it outside the classroom. I hate it. It's a waste of time. We've spent 13 long years studying it and can barely put a full sentence together or remember more than a few words. These are the sorts of negative comments that I hear annually from my undergraduate students in Halifax, Nova Scotia, about their experience of learning French in school. The irony is twofold. Canadian provincial governments, some more willingly than others, pump tens of millions of dollars into French immersion and into French language teaching. Fluency in the official languages of Canada opens up employment opportunities and advancement within the federal bureaucracy. Yet one encounters resistance and hostility towards French due to complex socio-political reasons, including a visceral rejection of anything that has the whiff of compulsion about it. Second, as Irish people will attest, one regularly hears at home comments about the Irish language similar to the ones above. In the final analysis, the comments speak volumes about human nature and the challenges and difficulties of teaching and acquiring a second language, especially one with the baggage that attaches itself to a language with special status within a jurisdiction, and really says very little about French and Irish as languages per se. In contrast to the overwhelmingly negative feedback about their year's study in French, I am fascinated by the sorts of preconceived and prepackaged views my students bring with them along to class with them, not just about Ireland in general, but about the Irish language in particular. Indeed, for some of the students, the language seems magical, if not downright exotic. A few weeks toiling with grammar and the rules of lenition and eclipse can shatter the strongest illusions and constitutions. Few students will stick with Irish beyond the first year, but of course that is the trend with language teaching in general these days anyhow. Most importantly, the best of the students will emerge with a working knowledge of Irish, an understanding of the linguistic complexity of Ireland, past and present, and for the majority of the students, I trust, with some of that sense of magic and the exotic still intact. The teaching of Irish forms the core of my teaching at St Mary's University. My involvement with the language goes beyond that, however. Irish remains primarily the language in which I write and publish, both scholarly and creative work. In addition, Irish is the language in which I communicate with my two children and that they speak with me, though my wife doesn't speak Irish, and the boys largely speak English to each other. The Irish language expression of dTír, literally between two countries, was used to refer to emigration in general, but also to the pattern of seasonal migration by agricultural workers, agricultural labourers such as the taddy hookers, potato gatherers, who spend part of the year working abroad, frequently in Scotland, before returning home to Ireland. For this commentator, an Irish citizen and Canadian permanent resident, who has spent most of the last 21 years living in Canada, but with regular trips back to Ireland, including extended sabbatical leave there, the expression Idir represents not just the physical experience of residing in and moving between two different countries, but the cultural and linguistic tensions that arise, in particular due to the obvious contradiction of a commitment to Irish while being largely removed from Ireland. Detached from the reality of the new Ireland that has emerged in the last 20 years, while refusing to be drawn into the Canadian mainstream, the result is that one can end up not only being enriched by one's experience, but also trapped in a no-man's land, hard to move back and reluctant to move on. When I recall the situation back in 1987, when I first came to Canada, what has happened since is close to a miracle. At that time, I'd have to wait for a fortnight after its publication for a newspaper such as Anish to arrive by mail, presuming that it arrived at all. I relied on my family back home to send me tapes of audio material that they had recorded from Radio na Gaeltacht, the Irish language radio station. Anytime I was back in Ireland, I record and videotape the occasional programme in Irish that RTE, Irish Public Television, broadcast in those days. On my return to Canada, I'd spent ages coaxing the university media people who were concerned about copyright issues, trying to coax them to transfer the videotapes from PAL format to NTST. If you're under 45, this doesn't mean anything to you at all. Frequently, the tapes were of poor quality in the new format. Of course, the information technology revolution has transformed everything. Now I can listen to Radio na Gaeltacht on live stream. I can watch TG Cahir programmes. Two Irish language newspapers, La Nua and Fuincha, are available in PDF format on their day of publication. I can order books online from publishers and from the specialised Irish language book site, litria.com, and know that the material will arrive within a week. There's no limit to the resources that are available to assist those who want to sample, to learn, and to practice Irish. The good news for Irish and for minority languages in general is that there's never been an easier time to learn another language. As evidenced by the frequency with which languages are dying off, however, it's clear that technology has its limitations, and it alone is not sufficient to safeguard a language or, with exceptions, to learn a language. The one truly irreplaceable link in the chain in the maintenance and the passing on of a language from generation to generation and from person to person is a socialisation that comes with human contact and communication. The conference Fís Gaeilge Mheiriceá Thuaidh, a vision for the Irish language in North America, held in New York in May of this year, was noteworthy for a number of reasons. It was the first time in living memory that Irish speakers and representatives of local Irish language groups from throughout North America had assembled on the one spot. The event was entirely in Irish. There was a large representation from Ireland, both voluntary and state organisations. The presence of the Irish-based people was potentially tricky. They were there to demonstrate their support for and recognition of Irish language activities and activists in North America, and to showcase opportunities to access funding in Ireland. Yet, they couldn't be seen to dictate how the North American groups should act in the future. Whatever about the ambitious title and the long-term potential of this idea of a vision for the Irish language in North America, the conference achieved more immediate and modest goals, allowing people like myself to meet others, many of whom I would only have known by reputation or through the web, people who are also raising families through Irish in North America or are teaching Irish, and encouraging us to build contacts and share resources. It demonstrated that Irish, though a minority language, is also a global language because quite a number of the participants were people who were born and raised in, outside Ireland, specifically in the United States. The conference highlighted one particular difficulty which goes to the heart of my work as an Irish language teacher in North America.